Hello and welcome to Crypto TV. My name is Lisa Amnagar, bringing you the latest news in crypto, blockchain, AI, and Web3. The year of 2024 shattered records in cryptocurrency investments, with a total market capitalization reaching over $3 trillion, more than double than it was at the beginning of the year. Not only that, there was a 33% surge in crypto ownership, which pushed currencies like Bitcoin to new record highs. So you might be thinking that you missed out, or that it's too late to invest. But what if there were other ways to still make profit from crypto? To explore this, I'm joined by Sarah Abuagela, partner and head of investment at Ceras Ventures. Her firm has backed over 70 crypto startup projects with investments totaling over $100 million. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
How's everything? How's your day going?
Yeah, good so far. Exciting markets these days, and yeah, glad to talk more about it today.
Yeah, I'm really interested. If we just look at Bitcoin, today it was trading around $96,000 in the morning, down from $109,000 earlier last month. So some are suggesting to buy the dip, but if we look at Bitcoin's volatility, is this actually a dip?
It's a super good question. This is also what I hear a lot also from non-crypto natives. I mean, if we talk about dips in the crypto industry, usually it says that around a price decline of 15 to 20% of Bitcoin and 40 to 50% of altcoins, that indicates a dip, right? So this is something that we have experienced in the past 2 to 3 weeks, especially with the latest movements also from US. If it would be higher than that, so if Bitcoin would decline more than 50%, then we're really talking about a crash and like entrance of the bear market. So to your question, it is a dip, and I think it's also super important to understand why there's a dip, right?
Yeah.
So one aspect is, for instance, profit taking. So the ones who wanted to sell off at the peak, they did. Also market sentiment. I mean, as you mentioned, we had a lot of movements in the past 2 weeks, especially with Trump coming into office and different announcements there. So there have been some uncertainties, which also drive this volatility.
But also overall, DeepSeek
disrupting
the markets a bit. But I think that's kind of the sentiment right now. A few years ago, Bitcoin was much lower, and people have made extravagant profits from it. So some people are, thinking it's just too late to invest or get into crypto. So what do you think? Is it too late to invest?
If we think about the facts where we're at right now, with reaching a market cap of over 3 trillion, of knowing how much was Bitcoin 10 years ago and where we are right now, that's the biggest testament actually to the industry and to Bitcoin, that it is here to stay. So it's not too late, because we have to think also not about crypto itself, but the use cases behind it, the solid projects building behind in the past years that really contributed to this push. So it's definitely not too late to get into crypto.
Which leads me into my next question. At Ceras Ventures, you spend a lot of time looking at new projects. So tell me a little bit what you're looking at right now. What kind of startups do you see have most potential, in which areas?
Yeah, for us at Ceras Ventures, so our mission and thesis is that we invest in startups with real use case and also with innovation that drive mass adoption. That's why we have been quite sector agnostic. And if you look at right now in the market, since 2 years, we have been looking into DePIN, Decentralized Physical Infrastructure. RWA is also a very big topic for us in terms of tokenizing assets. Also AI agents, it's also a very common narrative right now, but these are areas we're excited about.
Which, these are these areas that have kind of emerged. I don't think many people know that much about it. So if we just, let's say, look at DePIN, could you explain what that is and why is it interesting for investors?
Yeah, if we drill down the word DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure means actually that you tokenize infrastructure and really empower communities. I'll give you an example. For instance, internet sharing, right? You're in a community where how would it be if you share your internet, your hotspot, with other users and you get rewarded for it? Or if you have an EV vehicle, if you have an EV charger, right? How is it about charging, like enabling this charging, the chargers to the community and get rewarded for it as well? So it's really bringing additional incentives to physical infrastructure projects.
Okay. So it's kind of, I read somewhere that it's kind of like Airbnb, but instead of renting out your apartment, you're renting out your data.
Exactly, yeah. And I think really for Wi-Fi sharing, even for vehicle sharing, there's a lot of different use cases there. And it's exciting to see, especially in the past 2 years, there have been interesting projects like one of our portfolio companies, Peak. It's an infrastructure project layer 1 that brings in all those DePIN projects building on Peak. So
when we look at DePIN projects, what kind of, you mentioned EVs, but what kind of sectors do you think have the most potential? Like, for example, you have a project, maybe they're doing energy. Is that sort of an area where you see that DePIN could potentially give investors a large return on investment?
Yeah, I think energy would be one part. If it comes to mobility would be, for example, vehicle sharing, right? Also, if it comes to cloud sharing, internet sharing, I think these areas will be super exciting. And I just give you an example for DePIN itself. It's so important also right now the project's building on it to have these strong partnerships with the traditional players. Like, for example, with automotive companies such as BMW, they are looking into it, Tesla's looking into it, Bosch. So there are a lot of large corporations who are already having projects and collaborations. So it's really something that catches also the traditional industry.
Yeah, and when you kind of, let's say, I know that we met last week at the Global Blockchain Congress, and you had one-to-one meetings with startups. So when you're, let's say, evaluating a startup, what kind of metrics are you looking for where you can say, okay, this has potential?
Yeah, when it comes to due diligence for our potential investments, super important to see first aspect is team, like how is the team set up? What is the vision and mission of the founders? What is their skill set as well? So the team structure itself is very important. Of course, also the second part, the product thesis. What is a project trying to solve? Does it have fundamental demand? And is there a strong use case behind it? Another thing, of course, is also the business model, also security and compliance. So this is very important also for DeFi infrastructure projects. And another part is also tokenomics, as well as go-to-market. So how you actually bring this project either to end users, to other, if it's a B2B model, to other companies. So these are criteria we're looking at. Yeah.
And in terms of how much you can make from this, let's say if you invest, what kind of returns are we looking at?
Yeah, for VC, I always love to say, as venture capitalists, we're always at the beginning of the investment chain, right? If you compare VCs to private equity firms, we are early on, so high risk, but also high returns. So, of course, we have also portfolios that doesn't perform, but you can make really up to two-digit multiples. So,
because that's what I'm thinking. Because if you, let's say, have a company where there are many people sharing their data, then you would get less money. Like you would earn less, and if compared to if there were not that many people sharing their data, people would pay more for that.
Yeah, if it comes to DePIN projects, it's all about also how many users you onboard, right? So even now, the projects they are building, the example with the Wi-Fi sharing, right? You have to make sure you have a strong user base. So that's something actually also important to evaluate if you address end users. How do you attract them? How do you build the community to back up your project? So as you said, it's true. The higher the users, the more incentives, the more, how do you call it? The more mechanism is happening within the project. So community is a very big aspect as well.
And when we just look at, let's say, earning crypto from these, how does it work? So you need a wallet And then how does the whole process work? If somebody was to invest in a DePIN project, how would they earn crypto?
Yeah, definitely the first step is you have to set up your wallet. I mean, there are different options nowadays if you do it through exchanges or separate firms as well. So having a wallet, and purchasing then the token to really interact within the ecosystem of a DePIN project. Let's say if it comes to vehicle sharing or data sharing, really having the token of that project, let's say for instance for Peak, gives you already the first entry point to participate in the ecosystem.
And I saw that the DePIN market itself has surged 132% in the last year. So this year, do you see there's going to be more use cases? Or how are the trends?
Indeed, they are. I think what you just mentioned with the percentage is a high indicator for mass adoption, especially bringing it to non-crypto users. So also right now, based on latest statistic, and the number of DePIN projects are increasing. So I think what's very important to see right now, the projects building right now, are they able to onboard enough users, and also are they able to scale compared to traditional providers, traditional telecommunication providers, right? So this is something that will be tested, but looking at the amount of projects building right now and the user base, it's quite positive.
And you're based here in the UAE, so how is this environment set up for these types of projects?
I think it's a interesting part being in the UAE, because for crypto and Web3 in the past years, it established as a very dynamic and growth-oriented hub. The reason why it attracted so many startups in the past, so many industry players from US, from Asia coming here. Why? Because the government here is very fast in terms of decision making and looking out for these innovative solutions. And I give you an example. I mean, the blockchain strategy here started 2018. Our UAE Pass as UAE residents and citizens is already running on blockchain. So also in terms of tokenization, we can talk about later, they're really keen on applying these solutions. So being here, there will be a lot of use cases as well.
Yeah, I just saw recently the UAE government signed a partnership with Shiba Inu. So they're definitely taking a more progressive approach to crypto and just blockchain industry overall. But which leads me into another big trend that I've been hearing a lot for 2025 is tokenization of real-world assets. So this space is interesting because there are people tokenizing everything. So as an investor, what kind of real-world assets that are being tokenized actually have potential? Because there are items from cars to real estate to financial assets. Where do you see the most potential right now for investors wanting to earn an extra income?
I think number one would be financial products like bonds and securities. Reason being for that, we already saw a very high adoption and interest from traditional institutions like BlackRock, JP Morgan, Fidelity in the US. I mean, BlackRock, they built their first tokenized bond, right, built with one very known RWA project to really tokenize their bonds. So they're really like the drivers in that sector. A second sector would be also real estate. If it comes to fractional ownerships for end users, super interesting. I mean, also talking again about the UAE, for instance, Mantra, they signed an agreement with DAMAC here, also a developer to tokenize also real estate. So second point would be really real estate, and also third, commodities like such as gold. That would be also very...
Yeah, so you're saying sort of, if I understand, that when it comes to tokenization of real-world assets, you need to look at the people driving the adoption. So, for example, if BlackRock is driving adoption, then people should look into projects that are tokenizing financial assets, or am I understanding it correct?
Yes, I think what is important to observe if, as an individual investor, you want to tap into these areas, to really track moves from the industry, let's say, such as what I mentioned, financial institution, where are they heading to, with which projects are they doing the partnerships? That's one thing. Also in terms of where, even looking at the data, like at the statistics, like how many users are driven into RWA projects, that's super important. And really having and digging deeper into these three sectors, it's super important to get first this overview, okay, for the financial sector, for real estate, for commodities, the use cases, the players behind, not only the crypto startups, but also the traditional players. That's, I think, important to look at.
And are there any startups right now that you believe in or have potential to really take it to the next level this year?
I think one, and it just announced a major news, for instance, Ondo Finance was the startup that tokenized the bond for BlackRock, and they just announced to actually build a layer 1 infrastructure platform for securities, US bonds. And given now this positive sentiment in US, there's a huge potential of driving this sector, especially from the US government, the US players there. So I think that project, if it comes RWA for financial sectors, that will.
In terms of how you can earn crypto from this, how does that work?
I mean, there are different ways. A lot of people say it's, or some people think it's just about buying tokens, but it's not only about buying tokens. You can do really yield farming, staking. You can be part of RWAs, so you can be part of investing in real world assets. An example for real estate, right? Instead of buying a whole villa by the beach, you may not have the capital right now, but having fractional ownership of that asset and getting passive rental income, that could be an option. The same with DePIN. If you're part of that ecosystem and you're able to participate with Wi-Fi sharing, vehicle sharing, that would be another way of being part and earning also.
Yeah, and it's like passive income in
exactly.
a bit, yeah. But when it comes down to tokenization of real-world assets, I think I've interviewed and spoken to many companies, and some I think have good potential, but others, I don't really get it. You know, I try to understand, and sometimes it sounds more like a REIT, and others, let's say if it's tokenization of digital gold or gold, then it actually is backed by an actual asset. So how should we be looking at this?
I think the beauty, if it comes to RWA, is making physical assets digitally accessible. So if it comes to the villa example I mentioned, or being part at some point of these large bonds of BlackRock or JP Morgan, we can really think about RWA gives us assets and ownership, fractional ownership, that we didn't have before. Before, a lot of us as normal investors and consumers, sometimes we don't get access to these assets. So having a fraction of it brings also more liquidity to those assets. So I think that empowers us as end users and future investors to be part of that wave. So really thinking about the opportunities of RWA is something from that perspective to look at.
And how much does regulation play into all of this?
It plays a role. I mean, I always love to say there's a formula. If you want to do mass adoption, one thing is education. You need to understand what the innovation is about, right? Why are we going to use it? A second thing is regulation. How are we protected as end consumers, as investors, as an institution? And the third thing is, okay, the application. What is a real use case about it? And that really drives mass adoption. So looking right now where we're at, it's very interesting to see in the last 2 years, there have been very pro-crypto regulations happening. For instance, in Europe, we have the MiCA standards, right? They've been quite pioneering of setting that up fast. Now in US, there's now, with the latest executive order related to crypto, there's a dedicated working group looking at how we can, or how they can establish actually a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or how they make better regulations. So regulations plays a big role. It gives more credibility and security for individual investors, institutional investors. So definitely plays a part in it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to tokenization of real-world assets, in the U.S., they're struggling to decide whether it's a security or how to sort of categorize it. So, which means that you have to spend a lot of money on legal fees and trying to navigate these two agencies. Whereas here in the UAE, there's been more progressive nature. But if we look at just real-world tokenization of real-world assets, it hasn't really taken off. People have been talking about this for the last 2 years or even 3 years now. So why this year?
This year is a special year, and I think a lot of it was contributed in 2024. I think a very key event was establishing the Bitcoin ETF, because that brought the highest inflow from the traditional institutional space into crypto. So having this as a key point, also the election of a pro-crypto president in the US, I think that played also a very, very optimistic sentiment. And that's the thing where I wanted to say, again, to the question if we are late or not with investing in crypto, institutional interest and activities in the crypto flow is a validation. It's not a saturation. So that's how with RWA, we're already seeing that inflow from institutional investors validating the use case of it. So it's still not saturated. There's still a lot of clarity that that should be established with regulation, again, educating the people what is the real value for you as an end consumer, but it's not saturated. So that's why it's very interesting, even as an end consumer, to learn about it, to see how can you engage and be part of that.
Yeah, and there's also now, like we've been talking about, other types of avenues where you can invest in crypto. It sort of opens up the eyes for many people to sort of look into kind of the underlying technology that crypto operates on, where you could still discover even more opportunities, and that's what you've been doing with Ceras Ventures. But I must ask that when we look at just the crypto industry as a whole, there's all these ideas that come out. Like, for example, meme coins, huge market, but it has kind of like a short-term shelf life. So how can we really kind of decipher which kind of trends are for the long term, or if it's just another hype cycle?
Yeah, the meme coin part is very nascent narrative that we hear every day. If it comes to long term, I think it's about focusing on the use cases that are still building. I mean, RWA, DePIN, it has been building up in the past years. It's not something that came overnight. So that has really a long-term horizon. If it comes to meme coin itself, if it's about investing in a coin, it's a short-term, it can be short-term gain, can be huge loss, very volatile. But if you think about it, meme coin itself, the meme culture, it will remain. Time will tell now how strict regulations will be, especially now with latest launches of Trump meme coin, etc. But looking at very solid use cases, even with stablecoin also such a high adoption opportunity, and different governments are trying to push more for stablecoins as well. So this is also something we should not forget. These very solid use cases, they will remain long term. And if you decide as an individual to be part and engage, for instance, in meme coin trading, I mean, it's super high volatile. Again, quick gains, also big losses. I personally believe that the latest launch also of Trump meme coin has killed a lot of liquidity in the space, especially if we look at also in the markets at the altcoins. But there's a culture behind, there's a community behind. So even meme coins, they're not just going away. They also will remain because there's a community behind it. So
that's kind of maybe a key indicator for people getting into crypto, to kind of have that in mind, that if, let's say, a project does have a large community, that could generate more return on investment, whether it doesn't matter if it's in a meme coin, but if there's a huge community in a DePIN project or in an RWA project, it shows kind of the confidence of that project.
Exactly.
Right?
No, definitely. If it's backed by a large community, it definitely pushes the project. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we talk about. I mean, the UAE is quite progressive. It's attracted a lot of startups and also just in general companies. US, we'll see what happens. But when you look at sort of finding the next kind of opportunity, what are your thoughts on kind of emerging markets, and what should we be looking at when it comes to the big blockchain industry or crypto industry in those types of markets?
Super interesting. Will be emerging markets will drive also adoption of blockchain in a way that if it comes to financial inclusion, a very important part, Africa, Southeast Asia, LATAM, stablecoin narrative will play a big role, especially for high inflationary countries. So in terms of the financial part, will play a big role to bring there more ownership, more financial independence in these countries. But also, using blockchain even in governmental institutions. There have been also a lot of use cases. We talked about having digital IDs, right? What we have in the UAE with certain applications. So this can be also applied in other countries. So emerging markets, there's a huge population and very huge demand of applying that. So LATAM, Africa, Southeast Asia.
So it's kind of looking at maybe the stable coins that are used in those countries, and then checking the adoption rate if you want to sort of invest in that, right?
Exactly. I can give you an example. The reason why I got into crypto, I was convinced because I had friends who lived in high inflationary countries, and they only saved their personal wealth because they put it in digital USD, right? So I think the stablecoin narrative will be also a driving one in certain countries, but definitely something to have a look on as well in the future.
And just to round off our interview, what kind of message would you like to tell people who are really interested to kind of invest in crypto, but they think that they've missed their chance? What kind of message do you want to give them?
Yeah, I would like to say really, crypto itself, it's a technology that it will remain. It went through a lot of ups and downs in the past, but right now the current state of it shows that it's here to stay. And it's so important if you're interested into crypto, get really the knowledge about it, read in, find really peers in your community or mentors or support system that can help you to get more into it, because I think first understanding it is such a key point, and really finding also your niche within the space. It's a very wide space, but finding a niche that aligns with your interests will help also to get easier into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also just understanding that if you, let's say, are going to be investing in tokenization of real world assets, to understand how, let's say, those tokens operates a little bit, following charts maybe, and getting more used to the sometimes volatility that happens, and not getting scared if something crashes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like Bitcoin sometimes.
And also one point, if it really comes to trading, is so important to know your risk tolerance, because at the end it's super volatile. So really understanding, okay, what is the amount you would be ready to lose, right? So really educating yourself, getting advice, support from maybe experts in that field, it's super helpful.
Well, thank you so much. I think people might have a more optimistic outlook on crypto and how to invest after this interview. So I have to say thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And that's all we had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Lisa Amnegard, and you're watching Crypto TV.
Web3.tv